Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Next Generation SPC for Manufacturing. My name is David Peralta and I'm an Area Marketing Manager here at Minitab. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. We will have a Q&A session after this presentation, so please submit any questions you have and we will do our best to answer them. We recommend viewing this webinar via laptop or PC for best results. If you do experience a delay or sync issues with the audio and slides, please exit the webinar and rejoin or refresh the page. We will send a copy of the recording following the webinar, so there's no problem if you miss anything or you'd like to review afterwards. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. Moiz Juzar is our presenter today. He's a technical solutions architect here at Minitab. Moiz helps Minitab customers through their data journey, and he brings 10 years of analytics and business intelligence experience to Minitab, and has presented papers at numerous domestic and global conferences on strategies of how organizations achieve better results through efficient data analysis. We're so excited to have Moiz here with us today, and with that, I'll kick it off to Moiz.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session on Next Generation SPC for Manufacturing. So just to cover today's webinar agenda, we're going to cover, what and why SPC, some of the fundamental tools of SPC, such as control charts, capability analysis, and Pareto Chart, some of the core fundamentals. We're going to talk about the value of data, and then we're going to jump in through a variety of use cases. Use case one is going to be, normal SPC on product measurements. A second use case is using equipment data and doing SPC on that. And our third use case is going to be predictive process control, after which we're going to jump into a Q&A. You can ask questions at any time. There is a Q&A section in your browser right now where you can type in questions. I will get access to them and I will look at them frequently, but we will have a complete Q&A session at the end of this webinar. With that being said, I'll now go ahead and jump into the presentation. So what is statistical process control? So SPC, or statistical process control, is a method for achieving quality control in a manufacturing environment. Again, today's title is around manufacturing environment. So, that is what SPC is in terms of a manufacturing use case. But in reality, it's the use of statistical techniques to control a process. Why do organizations implement an SPC initiative? They want to improve their processes. They want to monitor and control those ongoing processes. It again leads back to that continuous improvement cycle where we have to continuously monitor, make data-driven decisions to lead a SPC initiative, and then move away from being reactive to more of a prevention production model. And the idea is many organizations today in their non-SPC or SPC use cases are very reactive, but being able to identify that and use a more prevention model can help organizations in their SPC initiative. The overall goal is to reduce excessive waste, lost labor hours, rework, and scrap. So if any of those metrics are running high, an SPC initiative will help you bring those down in terms of your waste, rework, and your scrap. There are four set of tools that we're going to discuss in today's presentation around SPC, and there are a variety of other tools such as a flow diagram, 5 whys, and a bunch of planning tools. But when it comes to data analysis, we're going to be looking at control charts, Pareto charts, histograms, as well as capability analysis, and see how that relates to more of the real-time aspect, making it a real-time statistical process control. So why are organizations looking more for a real-time SPC application is the immediate detection of process issues. So preventing the production of non-conforming products. I can't keep producing low-quality products. I want to identify upfront. I want that bad news to come to me quicker so that I don't have production of non-conforming products or products that are built to non-specifications. Reducing the risk of costly process disruptions, and having engineers the ability to monitor and control the variability in that manufacturing process. So it again goes back to that immediate detection of that bad news needs to travel fast. When it comes to quality assurance, ensuring that the product meets the specifications and your customers' expectations, and being able to document that product performance for regulatory purposes. Additionally, it allows process optimization by collecting and analyzing data on key process variables. SPC can really help identify areas where the process is underperforming or experiencing excessive variability. And that's really what it's around, is that variation that we're looking at in our process, and whether the information enables engineers to make those data-driven decisions for process optimization, for reducing waste, improving efficiencies, and minimizing your defects. So the basic SPC process is as follows. An operator typically would collect and prepare the data. An engineer would typically generate the SPC charts, and then we would test for test failures, investigate any root causes, and of course, we have to remove that data with a controllable root cause analysis. Often, this takes a long time to collect and prepare this data so that the SPC reports get evaluated either at the end of the day or end of the week or end of the month. And it really is a great starting point in understanding, are you currently doing SPC? How often are you doing SPC? And shortening the time of that SPC analysis, does it bring your organization value in being able to lower some of those rework key performance indicators that you are currently seeing at your organization? Now, when it comes to a successful SPC implementation, there are primarily three roles to take an SPC application live. You have your operators. Operators are on your manufacturing floors. They need to know when to collect the data. They also monitor any automatic data collections from the manufacturing floor. We want to enable manual data entry for validation reasons. If somebody fat fingers something wrong, software should be able to catch it. But overall, you need an operator who's going to give us that initial point of data, and also able to identify and document if there are any assignable causes or corresponding corrective actions if it does not meet our specifications. You then have engineers who monitor the overall performance. They evaluate trends using control charts and capability analysis, which we will be covering here in a short second. And they need an easy way to configure and update their SPC system itself. They also need to be alerted to issues immediately. So again, it's that bad news needs to travel fast. And if they're alerted when a process is out of control or out of specification, can trigger corrective necessary actions to be taken. And engineers must also determine the source of any problems and get to that root cause quickly. They additionally have to continuously follow that 80-20 rule to identify any of those root causes and solve those root causes for that continuous improvement. And again, keep analyzing this data over time as this is going to change, but overall tie in the process for which the product is being manufactured. The last role is going to be the supervisor's role, which is going to ensure that all stations are collecting data as required. And any automatic data collections are also being monitored appropriately from a centralized location. So now that we understand these three different roles, they're all critical to a successful SPC implementation. Without having the data from the operators, it's hard for engineers to really make decisions, to kind of understand the process variation associated with the process and be able to investigate any issues. All these roles are needed for it to be successful. Now, there are a variety of variations, specifically common cause variation and special cause variation. And many times over, we see organizations spend a lot of time trying to identify common cause variations, which are variations that are always going to be present in a process. They're naturally inherent, environmental changes, weather changes are some examples. And then we have special cause variation. And special cause variation is what we're trying to identify with SPC. It really represents assignable or unusual sources of variation that are not typically part of that process. They can either be detrimental or beneficial to the process, but our goal today is we want to identify any special cause variation as quickly as possible. So how do organizations really identify that special cause variation? And there's, again, those 4 tools we're going to talk about: the control charts, the capability, the Pareto, and the histogram. And by leveraging these analytical tools with real-time data, organizations can quickly identify problems and perform that data analysis to pinpoint their root causes. That's what's going to allow organizations to reduce their scrap, predict any defects, and maximize their profits. So these tools are, of course, not new. They've been around a very long time. But the idea is understanding what these tools allow you to do and equipping engineers with the ability to be able to run those analysis over and over again as time goes by and identify any issues in that process is the overall goal of an SPC initiative. So starting with the most popular and the first most place where you would start your SPC analysis is in control charts. Control charts give you the ability to identify whether your process is stable and consistent over time. A stable process is one that would only include common cause variation. It does not have any out of control points. So again, you're seeing over time whether any of your data points that you're capturing on your product that you're capturing any measurements on, whether those have any common cause and no out of control points. We also assess the effectiveness of a process change. So with control charts, it's easy to see shifts in the process mean and changes in the process variation. So again, really the starting point is I have data that I've collected. I want to see how that looks over time in terms of statistically looking at the data with my upper control limit and my lower control limit. You can communicate the performance of your process during that specific period and verify that your process is stable before you perform a capability analysis. A capability analysis is only valid when performed on a stable process. So let's say we're implementing SPC, we look at our data points, we look at the control chart, it seems like it's in control. We would then do a capability analysis. And the benefit of doing a capability analysis is to determine whether the process is capable of a product that conforms to your customer's specifications consistently over time. So capabilities are studies that are performed on statistically stable processes, again, leading back to that control chart. And the objective of a process capability study is to really establish the benchmarks regarding the quality of the manufacturing process. That's going to be your CPK, your PPM, just as a couple KPIs to kind of give you an idea. The advantages include to find whether the process is capable of consistently producing parts that are conforming to your specifications. And you can compare these over time to see whether your performance has improved. Looking at CPK over time as a metric allows you to see the capability of your process itself. As part of that capability, you also have access to a histogram, which basically shows you the distribution, the frequency distribution for that data set. Measurements tend to cluster, around the middle of the distribution with less data around the tails, what a typical, good histogram for a good process would look like, and a bar graph that shows the amount of variation in the process itself. When that distribution does not follow that normal distribution curve, an assignable cause has come into play. So now you're looking for, specifics as to your measurements and the frequency of those measurements to understand, are there any assignable causes that have come into play? Advantages are it helps to find the nature of the distribution of the data. With control charts, you're really looking at, your control limits. You're not looking at your specific measurements. In this example, you are looking at your specific measurements and the frequency of those measurements. And it really helps understand what those actual measurements are, how often they've happened, and identify any unusual patterns, whether you're skewed to the right or skewed to the left. Again, our goal in looking at the histogram is to produce a good process and a good quality product is to be as close to the target as possible. And then finally, the Pareto chart, which of course leads from the Pareto principle of the 80-20 rule. 80% of the problems are due to 20% of causes. It's a combination chart of a bar chart and the percent frequency along with the curve for the cumulative frequency. So you're seeing how often is that issue happening and which specific one, and the percent of how often it is happening, as well as the count of how often it is happening. And it allows you to prioritize the problems or causes of a problem and enables you to focus on the vital few. So when you're starting to capture data with, starting to plot them on control charts, attaching an assignable cause to an out of control or out of specification point will help you understand over time what are your majority problems. And focusing on the 80-20 rule will allow you to really kind of focus on the vital few that need to be addressed. And it's, again, a continuous improvement cycle. So you run it over and over again as time goes by. And the idea is you keep focusing on that 80-20 rule to identify which problems you want to continuously solve over and over again. So we understand the basics of SPC, but now we need to do this analysis all the time. So we set up these live SPC dashboards so that we can understand our process better. We can see which processes are currently active, what is not active, what is percent out of control, what is percent out of spec. I need to focus on the ones that are the worst performers rather than focusing on the ones that are performing decently. Detect any changes in our process, which could lead to poor quality, generate alerts so engineers can get real-time notifications so that they can address those problems proactively, and measure our ability to meet those specifications using the capability analysis tool as well. With that being said, we can only do this if we have data. So we live in a world where data is gold, and organizations need to capture as much data as possible. There are many ways that organizations are capturing data today. We find organizations that use pen and paper on the manufacturing floor, but they're still able to capture that data to do the analysis that is required. We also have operators that enter values into a form-based system. We work with automated gauges that operator can control or press a button on the manufacturing floor that would enter that into a form. And then we have systems that are automatically taking data measurements. Think of your CMMs that are automatically taking those data measurements and producing those analysis or access to that data for you to be able to produce the analysis. The more access to data that you have, the deeper the analysis possible on the different processes that can be monitored. And again, we're going to circle back to this as to why having a lot of data really matters. But as you can identify your different processes and the different pieces of data that can be captured around that process, you can, create better products and minimize your waste and minimize your defect rate by using that data that you have. So with that intro, and again, if you want to learn more about control charts, capabilities, Pareto, or SPC in general, please visit Minitab. We have our education hub where we cover all those statistical tools in detail. Today's goal, again, is just to set the stone of how manufacturers are doing SPC using our different applications. So what we see with a typical SPC use case, let's look at our operator input. We'll have a operator who would input some data. That data goes into an SPC tool, and then it would identify whether the process is in control. And if the process is in control, no one's notified the production of that process or the product is complete. If the process goes out of control, feedback should be required from the operator. Is there an assignable cause? Is there a corrective action that needs to be associated with this out of control point? And of course, real-time notifications being sent to engineers to be able to react and identify, help identify the assignable cause and corrective action for that out of control point. Another use case that we will look at is automatic machine data in SPC to predict machine failures. So you have equipment out there that can produce a wide range of data points, and bringing those data points directly into our solution by prepping that data before pulling it into SPC, and then again doing that similar analysis on those measurements, on those indicators, whether that process is out of control, it would send notification, and we talk about that here in just a second. But if the process is in control, there's no machine failure, you should be able to build a good quality product. With those two use cases in mind, let's jump into the real-time SPC application. So Minitab RealTime SPC is a cloud-based application, and I'll just jump to the homepage of this cloud-based application. When users log the application, they would simply navigate to the URL, and there's three main portals in the RealTime SPC solution powered by Minitab. You have the administration portal, where administrators would control which users have access to what product or process. You have the engineering portal, where engineers would come in to analyze their data. And you have the operations portal, where operators would log in to go ahead and put in their measurements and, of course, monitor the control chart as well. Let's start with an operator. In an operations portal, I log in. I usually work on these three stations. I work on a car engine. I also work on a ball and a baseball bat. And let's say I'm producing this ball. That's the product that we want to produce. And I want to go ahead and kind of go to my dashboard to start taking my measurements. As you will see, as an operator, when I go to the dashboard, it shows me the data for the last 24 hours. And I can go further. I could say I want to see the data for the last 48 hours, but it will limit what the operator is able to see only up to 7 days. You want them to only see the data that they've been working on for a short period, as you are seeing over here. When the operator is ready to take some measurements, he or she would simply click on Start, which would then allow them to plug in their values. And in my case, I'm going to say my diameter is 71, 72, 73. We'll go 51, and then I'll go, let's say, 91. And as you can see, I inputted a measurement that violates the specification limits. And the system wants the operator to identify the assignable cause and the corrective action for this measurement. Now, in this case, I know it is probe related, so I'll go ahead and select my probe related as my assignable cause. And then I can go ahead and apply corrective action. So I modified the probe measuring speed, and I can say I'm always made this change 8:23 at 11:30. Go ahead and save any notes, and then continue taking my measurements as you are currently seeing me do over here. Additionally, if there are instructions you would want to provide the operator with images or any instructions on how to take those measurements, that can be displayed here as well. But finally, an operator would say save and exit. It would go ahead and bring them back here to the control chart and allow them to see that new data point that they just put in the values for show up directly here on the control chart itself. Now, once they're done and that out of control point, what it would do is it would trigger an alert to an engineer. So an engineer would come into the application and they would navigate into the engineering portal, and they're seeing, all right, that ball station is currently running 5.56% is out of spec, 33% is out of control. I want to see the details behind this. They would simply be able to drill down and see the details for the three measurements that we took: the diameter, the height, which was out of control. That's the point that we're mainly interested in. And they would be able to click on it, see any of the assignable causes. So in this case, it was probe related, and my comments could be seen over here. And the engineer could also go in and add any additional comments that he or she would want to be identified for this process. Once we attach it to an assignable cause, that point is not used in the calculations for our standard mean and our control limits as well. Again, if I wanted to see my capability analysis, I could simply switch my tab over and look at how capable the process is. Over this time, it seems to be pretty capable in comparison of our spec limits. But what if I wanted to change my date range? I wanted to see, let's say, my last 365 days worth of data. I could simply go ahead and filter it. And now I can see that I do have some points that were not as conform to how I was running my process for the last 7 days or for the last 1 day, as you are seeing over here. Additionally, I can see the capability analysis for all the different measurements that we were taking. And if I wanted to see the assignable causes over time, I would be able to see that as well. In this case, we have two main assignable causes. Majority of my issues are tied to the CMM recalibration, and the corrective action that we take is we recalibrate the CMM device, as you are seeing over here. Now, this would be a typical SPC analysis that can be done in real-time SPC, but we now have organizations that have access to data that is coming from their machine equipment as well. So let's take a look at one of those examples. where in this case, I want to look at the control chart for a different product and process. I'm mainly interested in my measurement verification system, and I want to look at maybe not 365. We'll come back. A lot of data. Let's take last 5 days and kind of analyze this data. Now think of this as data that is coming from an equipment. Let's go down to 2 days. It's just a lot of data. And I'm taking a measurement. My equipment is giving me a measurement almost every 3 minutes, I believe, is how I set this one up. I can easily zoom in and focus in on the points. And what we're looking at in terms of this car engine are 5 key metrics. We're looking at air temperature. We're looking at idling speed. We're looking at process temperature, torque, and vibration. These are all measurements that are coming from my equipment that is producing my product. Looking at these, I can clearly tell that if I'm focused on air temperature, it is completely out of control. I mean, every dot here is red itself, but it still allows me to do an analysis to kind of understand that what should I be focusing on? Should I be focusing on idling speed? Should process temperature doesn't look any good? And we're constantly getting this data from machine. Can I really say that if a point goes out of control for my process temperature, that I should send out an alert and have an engineer look into it? Or is this variable not very relative to my analysis? So being able to do this SPC gives us the ability to get access to all these different variables and understand these variables over time in this process itself. Now, coming to the second part of this presentation, taking this analysis or this SPC data, we want to build out an early warning system. So we want to identify relationships within the process. As you can see in here, if I wanted to set up an alert and notify an engineer every time air temperature went out of control, it would constantly get notifications that the process is not in control. And that's what the data is telling us, that this process is really not in control. The values that we're getting are not in control for the data that we have available. So I want to be able to identify which one of those relationships within the process, what should we focus on? And live SPC monitoring, setting up those alerts so we can detect those potential problems early. But what if we could start by predicting defects? We want to identify potential variables and do some initial screening. We also want to identify critical variables and their tolerances, set up an automatic data collection so the data keeps coming into our system so we can go ahead and start using that data to predict those defects, and then build like SPC dashboards and configure them with alerts. What you're getting is you're having the ability of detecting potential problems earlier. There's a greater chance you can prevent your scrap and rework. And this is really done by linking Minitab's predictive models to get live data to get real-time predictions of your potential quality issues. It's basically what we would call an early warning system to trigger alerts ahead of your SPC alerts. So let's take a look at what that would look like. So again, it all comes back to having that data, and SPC is a great part in being able to start collecting that data. But ideally, we want to take some of that data. We have, baseline data. We push it into Minitab and we build a predictive model. That predictive model, once it's built, and we'll talk about how we can build that predictive model using Minitab functionality, we can send that model into Minitab Model Ops and put that model into operation. Now that we have that model built, we need to start collecting more data. So we have live data that is flowing into Minitab Connect. Minitab Connect is what allows you to do your data imports from your live data sources, prep that data, and store that data. And that data that it's coming from your source, from your manufacturing floor, is going into Minitab Connect, is then being sent against that model that we sent from operation itself. And the response of the model is being sent back and being stored in Minitab Connect. Additionally, once that is done, if the model response is not something we're used to, we can set up email and SMS alerts to really trigger off that early warning system using this methodology. So how does it all work? We left off in RealTime SPC with this measurement verification data, as you see over here. With a single click, I can, of course, go ahead and download all this data directly into Minitab. So again, with a single click, you can get your data directly into RealTime SPC, or from RealTime SPC into Minitab format. I have it open already here. As you can see, we have some of those same measurements: air temperature, process temperature, some of those different measurements that we're capturing over here. And what I would like to do now is I would like to understand the relationships between these different variables. So I'm going to navigate to the Predictive Analytics module, and we have a automated machine learning, and I want to discover the best model. So I can simply go ahead and click on this. And as you can see, I did run this earlier before the webinar, so I do have some of my fields already filled in, but I want my response to be my machine failure. And what are my continuous predictors? They're basically all the ones that we've looked at from an SPC perspective, from air temperature to vibration. And then I added a categorical predictor, such as who was the QA person to take the measurements, as you can see over here. I can simply go ahead and click on OK. And the system now runs through this data and identifies which model is the most appropriate to use for this data analysis, as you will see here in just a short second. So just again, as a quick recap, we started with the data in SPC. We got that data from SPC directly into Minitab, and we're now using Predictive Analytics module and discover the best model functionality to identify some details about this data itself. Now, one of the first things I want to look at is my model selection. And I'm looking at the 4 different models that Minitab tested this data against. That's going to be our TreeNet, our logistic regression, our random forest and CART model. And what I'm really looking at is the misclassification rate. And I can see the TreeNet is the best model for this data set with the lowest misclassification rate, as you can currently see over here. Now I can go ahead, and since TreeNet did become the best model to use, it already goes ahead and shows the details for this model itself. I can again keep going ahead and scrolling down where I want to identify my relative variable importance. And looking at this chart, I can go ahead and identify which one of these variables are of relative importance to the model being able to predict machine failure. In this case, torque is the #1 leading, followed by idling speed, followed by vibration, and then of course QA, whoever's taking it, does not even matter. It's not very important in terms of being able to predict the machine failure using the TreeNet model. Well, let's take a look at that. We're looking at torque and idling speed, and if I actually jump back to my SPC, if we look at idling speed and we start focusing on just a smaller subset of data, I can quickly see that usually the process is in control, and then a couple times it jumps out of control, maybe setting up real-time alerts on idling speed and on torque, because those are the 2 most important factors in being able to detect machine failure. I can go ahead and set up alerts directly on these, and that would give me the SPC alert of something is going on. But now we also have this model, which is basically saying that torque and idling speed are the 2 most important variables. If I scroll down, it'll give me a lot more detail. Looking at torque here, if it's goes below 235, chances of failure are high. If it goes above 275, chances of failure are high. And you can see all these details. And again, if you would like to learn anything more about predictive analytics, please do reach out to us, and we'd love to have the conversation with you. But taking this one step further, what do I want to do is I want to take this model into production. So this is a static output where I've created a model using the data that is available, but now I want to productionize this model. So I'm just going to go ahead and run my TreeNet real quick. This is the model that I want to use. So not the Discover the Best model, but the TreeNet, which was the best model in comparison to all 4 models that we ran our data against. And what we can do is we can go ahead and send this model to Minitab Model Ops directly for the model that we built in Minitab statistical software. So once again, I can click on it. It'll go ahead and give me some options to send this model into model ops. And what that's doing is it's creating a model. I can just go ahead and log in here. It's basically creating that model and allowing you to understand the details around that model. So if I go into the details, what are the variables that we're looking at, and then allows you to calculate drift and stability of this model as well. Now, how does all of this work and what is the benefit of doing that? Well, the idea is once I have this predictive model and I can productionize this model, as I give the model measurements, I'm able to predict machine failure itself. So what that looks like, if I just jump into my next slide, we're looking at a couple of different applications that really require, getting data from a variety of sources and the interaction between all the Minitab products that are available. And that's, of course, providing you a complete solution on getting your data, analyzing your data, and helping you identify any root causes as quickly as possible. So starting with the Minitab RealTime SPC application, this is where your users are going to do their SPC analysis. Sometimes it's going to include automated data flow. So data coming from machine equipment or measurements coming automatically from a CMM device, and how that gets powered by, or how RealTime SPC gets powered by that data is through Minitab Connect. Minitab Connect is the backbone for all of these applications to connect directly to your live data sources. And that's where we support a wide range of databases, data warehouses. You get your Oracles, your SQL, you have cloud applications that you're using, or REST APIs that you want to pull data from. We can support those. You also have data that is sitting in spreadsheets and data files. We can support those as well and start pulling them in. And if you're already using a lot of cloud applications, like you have data in AWS or you have data in Snowflake, we would be able to connect to those sources and pull that data in directly into Connect itself. Connect would allow you to connect to your data sources and automate the import of that data. Additionally, Connect will also allow you to prep that data, blend and refine before allowing you to push that data either into RealTime SPC or into model ops. So once we connect to your data sources and we're pulling that data in on a frequency, we're pushing that data to RealTime SPC. RealTime SPC is doing that SPC analysis. And if there's need for manual data entry, that data is getting inputted directly into RealTime SPC, as you saw in today's presentation earlier today. We could get real-time notifications when a process goes out of control or out of specification, and alerts the engineers that the process has some variation accordingly. Now, as we start collecting a lot of data over time, we can take that data and push that data into Minitab's engine. And using the Predictive Analytics module, we can identify the best model that fits data for the variables that we're using, and take that model and send it directly into Minitab Model Ops. Now we've taken the model that we've built on our real-time SPC data into Minitab Model Ops. And now when the data comes in from your source system directly into Connect, it's still going to go into real-time SPC to do your statistical process control, but that data can now also be pushed directly into Minitab Model Ops, which will then send the response of, in this example that we use today, machine failure, directly back to Connect and send out real-time notifications to the engineers, as you are seeing here in this example. So again, a wide range of functionalities of how organizations are doing SPC analysis today. Many organizations are just sticking with the original QA team SPC type examples where data flows in, you're doing statistical process control and setting up real-time alerts to identify when your process has any variation. But then taking that data that you've collected over time using an SPC application and being able to set up that early warning system using Minitab Model Ops and a predictive model to then get notifications, real-time notifications from your model before SPC is even able to detect them as well. With that being said, I'm now going to pass it back to David. We're going to open it up for Q&A. And I do see a lot of questions already, and I'll start going through some of these. David, back over to you.
Thanks, Moise. That was a great presentation. I'm just going to give the audience a few more seconds to submit their questions. In the meantime, while you are waiting for those questions to come in, we do really appreciate your valuable feedback. So if you could take that survey that's accessible from the pink survey box at the bottom of this window, we'd really appreciate it. Now let's get to some questions here. Here's one for you, Moise. Do you support Laney P charts?
That's a great question, and absolutely we do support Laney P charts in our real-time SPC application. That is correct.
Great. We have another question here. Can real-time SPC be deployed internally?
Real-time SPC, Minitab Model Ops, Minitab Connect, those are all cloud-based applications. They cannot be deployed locally. They do require to be deployed on Minitab's cloud only.
Okay. Does the SPC solution work with electronic gauges?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have electronic gauges today on your manufacturing floor, if they're sending data over a Bluetooth receiver or RS-32 cable, absolutely, we would be able to work with them using our SPC application.
Here's another. Can you assist in a migration from other SPC tools and or bring historical data into your system?
Yes, absolutely. So we'd of course work with you in understanding, how you've set up your current SPC solutions, but any of that historical data that you have, like I mentioned, the value of data, that data is gold. The more data you have, the better your predictive models will be. And the idea is, yeah, we will work with you in being able to migrate you from any existing tools that you might be using and also bring in any historical data that you might have into our real-time SPC application.
If we have multiple plants, would we at headquarters be able to see and do data across plants?
Yes, you would. So if you have the same product and process being done at multiple plants, you can understand the process variation or look at control charts and capability analysis across those plants as long as it's the same product and process that you are producing at those separate plants itself. David,
Great.
I think I have a good question here
Go ahead.
I found. Do you have examples of suppliers using SPC and customers able to view that data in SPC? So yes, we have. I recently worked on that example where we had suppliers providing data, quality-related data. Also, the lab was doing quality-related data on those suppliers that the supplier was providing and comparing those to the data points that they were providing in comparison to the tests that they were performing once that raw material was accepted. But we have worked those kinds of scenarios with our customers as well.
Great. I think we have time for one or two more questions here, Moise.
Yeah, I have another question. Oh,
yep.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I have another question here that the SPC limits are automatically calculated. Is there a way to fix these limits? So yeah, your mean control limits are all being automatically calculated either based on the number of points that you specify. So you can specify, using the last 25 points, using the last 250 points. You can also go ahead and provide your mean and standard deviation, which would fix those limits. Those limits would be calculated always using the mean and standard deviation that is provided for that specific process measurement that we're capturing. I'll do one last question. This one's easy. Will there be a recording that we can access after the session ends? So absolutely, you will be able to access this recording directly from Minitab's website. Do give us some time to get it out there, but you will have access to view this again.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Moise, for answering those questions. I think that's all the time we have for the Q&A, but we will try to get back to you with those questions that we did not get a chance to answer. But yeah, thank you again, Moise. We hope everybody enjoyed today's webinar and want to further engage with the Minitab community. If you really enjoyed this presentation, we invite you to join us for a Minitab Exchange event. Minitab Exchange is a gathering of individuals who are seeking to leverage data analytics to improve business processes and help organizations save time and money. Minitab experts will guide the audience through topics that will help deepen their knowledge and understanding of Minitab solutions through open conversation and exchange of ideas. You will have the chance to network with colleagues and develop new skills that can be implemented immediately. We are hosting 2 exchange events here in the US. The first one is going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina on September 14th. And the next one is in Minneapolis, Minnesota on October 9th. We also have 2 exchange events in Europe. One will be in Coventry, United Kingdom on October 3rd, and Lyon, France in October 10th. We also have 3 in Australia. One will be in Brisbane on September 21st, Victoria on November 9th, and Sydney on November 29th. So please fill out those surveys, which can be found in the pink survey box at the bottom of your windows, and specify which location you're interested in attending so we can have the right person follow up with you. And now to just close this webinar, I'd like to share some information for those who may not be as familiar with Minitab. For 50 years, Minitab has helped companies spot trends, solve problems, and discover valuable insights in their data. In the webinar today, you saw RealTime SPC. Some of our other solutions include Minitab Connect, Minitab Engage, Minitab Workspace, Minitab Model Ops, Education Hub, and SPM. We also offer training, statistical consulting, and technical support services. Now, thank you again for attending the webinar. We hope you really found some value in the presentation, and have a great rest of your day.